You are standing on ground that is about to stop being survivable. Not in a lifetime, not in a generation. The decision has already been made somewhere north of you, under what will eventually be called Siberia, where the crust is opened and has no intention of closing. You will not be killed by lava. Almost nothing was. You are going to be killed by the air, and then by the light, and then by the water. Each of those arrives in a specific order, and each one is caused by the one before it. This is the end of the Permian, the great dying, the worst thing that has ever happened to life on this planet. Here is the order it comes for you. One thing before we start, because it changes how you watch this. There is no ranking here. Nobody has ever published a list of which of these mechanisms killed the most species, and anyone who gives you one is inventing it. What the evidence does support is an order, a sequence in time where each stage produces the conditions for the next. That turns out to be worse than a ranking. A ranking is a list. A sequence is something closing in. Stage one is the heat. We know the temperature of an ocean that dried up a quarter of a billion years ago, and we know it fairly precisely, which sounds like it should be impossible. The method is oxygen isotopes locked in conodont fossils. Conodonts were small, eel shaped marine animals, and the mineral in their tooth like elements locked in the oxygen isotope signature of the water they grew in, which gives us a temperature estimate for that water. Collect enough of them across enough of the boundary, and you get a thermometer reading spanning the extinction. The reading is this: tropical sea surface temperature reached roughly 40 degrees Celsius. On land, at the equator, surface temperatures ran somewhere between 50 and 60. 40 degrees is not a warm sea. 40 degrees is a sea in which most marine animals cannot extract enough oxygen from the water to power the metabolism the heat is forcing on them. The warmer the water, the less oxygen it holds, and the more of it a body needs. Those two curves cross, and when they cross, the animal suffocates in water that still has oxygen in it, just not enough to meet the demand the heat has created. Here is what that did to the map. For roughly 5 million years, there was a band across the middle of the planet where complex life did not live. Not scarce, not struggling, absent. Researchers call it the equatorial dead zone, and it is visible in the fossil record as a gap in latitude rather than a gap in time. So if you are standing anywhere near the tropics, you do not have a heat problem, you have a geography problem, and the only solution is to be somewhere else, permanently, along with everything you eat. Most things could not move. That is stage one. Stage two is the part almost nobody includes, and it is the one I would least want to live through. The sunlight stopped being safe. Fossil pollen from the boundary is deformed. Grains that should separate cleanly come out fused into malformed tetrads. And chemically, those same grains are loaded with UV absorbing compounds, which is a plant doing the only thing a plant can do about ultraviolet light, manufacturing its own sunscreen in bulk and failing. That is a fingerprint of ozone collapse. The layer that filters UVB out of sunlight thinned enough that the surface of the Earth was being sterilized from above. And this is not an inference somebody made once and everyone repeated. In 2018, a team ran it as an experiment. They took living pine, Pinus mugo, and grew it under simulated UVB at N Permian intensities. The pollen came out deformed in the same way. They reproduced a 252 million year old injury in a greenhouse. The mechanism is the ugly part, and it is where the sequence starts locking together. The Siberian traps did not simply erupt onto the surface. Sheets of magma pushed sideways into the sedimentary rock underneath, and that rock included thick beds of evaporite, salts. Cooking evaporites at that temperature releases halocarbons, and halocarbons destroy ozone. The same event that heated the planet was, at the same time and by a completely separate chemical route, stripping the planet's shielding. So, stage two is not a second disaster, it is stage one's exhaust. You are now in a place too hot to stay in, being burned by light you cannot see, and you have not yet met the thing that is actually going to kill you. Here is the inversion at the center of this whole event, and it is the fact I would build the video around if I could only keep one. The volcano is not the story. What the volcano burned is the story. When those magma sheets intruded, they did not only cook salt, they cooked coal. Siberia had enormous coal deposits, and the intrusion set them alight underground at a scale with no modern comparison. We know this because of the ash. Fly ash cenospheres, the hollow glassy spheres produced by burning coal, the same particles a coal power station emits today, are found in N Permian sediments as far away as Arctic Canada. Something burned coal so violently that its ash crossed an ocean and settled into the rock record on another landmass. And burning coal is not the same as a volcano venting. It changes the carbon budget by a different order. Contact metamorphism, the heating of those sediments by the intruding magma, is estimated to have produced somewhere between 4 and 9 times more carbon dioxide than the normal degassing of the sills themselves would have. That range is worth keeping as a range. The uncertainty is real, and even the bottom of it is catastrophic. So the warming in stage one was not volcanic in the way you picture volcanic. It was a fossil fuel event, ignited from below, running unattended for as long as there was fuel, which brings us to the ocean, because that is where all of that carbon went next. If you survived stages one through three, you did it near water. Water buffers temperature, water blocks UV. Every instinct you have says the water is the safe option. Stage four is the water. A hotter ocean holds less oxygen to begin with. The animals in it need more, and the water column stratifies so less of what oxygen there is ever reaches depth. Push enough carbon into the atmosphere, and the deep ocean goes anoxic. That much is straightforward, and it is bad enough on its own. What happened next is not straightforward. In an ocean with no oxygen and plenty of sulfate, a particular kind of bacteria takes over. Green sulfur bacteria do not use oxygen. They photosynthesize using hydrogen sulfide and they produce more of it. But they need light, which means they can only live in the top layer of the ocean, the part the sun reaches. So if you find them, you have found something specific. You have found an ocean where hydrogen sulfide had risen all the way into the sunlit zone. We find them not as fossils because they do not fossilize, as molecules. Isorenaritane and aryl isoprenoids, preserved in boundary sediments at Meishan in China and in sections in Australia, and carrying a carbon isotope signature that points to green sulfur bacteria specifically, rather than to anything else that can make the same molecule. The surface of the sea was toxic, not the depths, the part you would swim in. Water was not the safe option. There was no safe option. That is the whole of stage 4. I want to stop the sequence for a moment and do something most videos like this will not do. There is a next step in the story that you have probably heard, and it is not established. It is a proposal. The proposal is that hydrogen sulfide did not stay in the water, that it gassed out of the ocean into the atmosphere in quantities large enough to poison animals on land, meaning the sea reached inland and killed things that never touched it. It is a genuinely compelling idea, and it would tie the marine and terrestrial extinctions into one mechanism. But look carefully at what the biomarkers actually prove. They prove hydrogen sulfide reached the sunlit surface of the ocean. They do not prove it crossed into the air in lethal concentrations, and they do not prove it killed anything on land. Those are separate claims, and the evidence for them is not the same evidence. So, proposed, debated, unresolved. If this channel tells you something is settled, it will be because it is settled. This one is not. Back to the sequence, because the last stage has the same problem and it is even more interesting. There is a signature in the boundary rock that shows up almost everywhere anyone looks for it: nickel, an anomaly, global in extent, and geochemically traceable to Siberian volcanism. The eruptions put an unusual quality of nickel into the environment, and it's settled worldwide. That is the confirmed part. Now, here is what one research team did with it. In 2014, a team at MIT proposed an explanation for why the carbon record spikes the way it does. Their argument is that a single celled organism called methanosarcina acquired a new metabolic capability at almost exactly this moment through horizontal gene transfer, letting it produce methane far faster than before. It had all the organic carbon it could want. What limited it was nickel, an essential ingredient in the enzyme it uses. And then Siberia put nickel everywhere. I have told you that carefully, and here's why. One team proposed this. It is one paper. Searching for corroboration returns that paper and the press coverage that paper generated, which is not the same thing as other scientists independently reproducing it. Coverage multiplies a single source until it wears the shape of consensus. So, this is not scientists discovered that microbes ended the Permian. This is one hypothesis, well argued, not yet independently confirmed, which happens to be the most interesting idea in the entire event. You are allowed to enjoy it. You should know exactly how much weight it holds. Heat. then light, then air, then water, then possibly a poisoned sky, then possibly a microbe finishing what the volcano started. One question is left, and it is the one that makes the rest of it land. How long did this take? Uranium lead dating of ash beds at the boundary puts the main extinction interval at under 100,000 years, possibly far less. You will see the figure 60,000 years quoted a great deal, and that number is real, but it carries an uncertainty of roughly 48,000 years in either direction, and almost every retelling drops it. The honest version is this: less than 100,000 years, and plausibly a small fraction of that. Against 4.5 billion years of Earth history, that interval is not a chapter, it is closer to a typographical error, which brings you back to where you were standing. Nothing in that landscape looks like an extinction. The temperature is survivable this morning. The sky is a normal color. Everything that is going to kill you is already in motion. And the first thing you would actually notice is that it is getting warm. The heat was first. It was always going to be first. Everything after it was a consequence. Roughly 4 out of every 5 species in the ocean did not come out the other side. On land, close to 70% of vertebrates